Hello, I'm Anthony. The subject I want to talk about today is that of synthesizer presets, specifically synthesizers because I'm writing a lot of electronic music at the moment, so it's very forefront in my mind. But it's an area where it's possible to lay oneself open to the criticism of you're cheating, you're using somebody else's sound, that's a preset that somebody else has built, you're picking it up and using it, and you should do something with it before you're allowed to call that sound your own. I want to deal with that subject today, and obviously I'm kind of top-loading the discussion by saying I think that theory is completely ridiculous, and I'm going to hopefully debunk it today. But I want to approach the question today from the perspective of trying to find creative inspiration behind the asking of the question itself. Is there anything in the use of synthesizer presets per se, or our approach to them, that can help us to write better music? Hope you find this one interesting today, and if you do, check out the Patreon and channel member links below. Awesome way to help support my channel. Now, it's fair to say that from my own perspective, the use of synthesizer presets is absolutely essential because I have almost no foresight when I'm writing music. I can't really see where I'm going. I use the sounds that I'm generating at any given moment in time to inspire me creatively, and then I jump from that point. I'm not a person who can envisage the end product. In fact, when I start writing a piece of music, I have absolutely no idea what it's going to be. This piece of music that's on screen at the moment ended up being called Sound of Mind. I released it recently, and I'll put a link to it above and in the description below. For about 6 weeks, this piece of music was called 9th of January because every project that I start is called a date, and it develops a personality, and I know what 9th of January sounds like while I'm writing it. Eventually, at some point in that process, it will get a name. It might have some emotional resonance to the music that I'm writing. It might just pop into my head suddenly one moment, and there it is, there's the name. But I have no idea what's going on at any given time. And so for me, presets are really important because they give me that jumping off point, that springboard to help me to get up and running. In the case of Sound of Mind, I lent very heavily on presets. In fact, at the beginning of the piece of music, if we jump to bar 13, where there's just a couple of synthesizer lines and a very simple kick drum, those two synth lines that you're hearing there, the swelling JP8 and the chill factor, are almost completely stock. We have a look at the automation on one of the tracks. I think there's a tiny bit of the modulation wheel automation on one of them. Chill factor is literally completely stock. I haven't changed it at all. So the fundamental sound, the baseline anchor point for this entire piece of music, and you can see how long these sounds go on for, are absolutely stock presets. Now, I don't have a problem with that at all for this reason. Those presets have been designed by a person and they sound amazing. But an acoustic piano has been designed by a person and they sound amazing. How many presets does a piano have? The answer is one. You can't do anything with the sound of an acoustic piano. It is what it is. That doesn't mean to say that the construction of the piano, that specific piano, isn't really important. To the trained ear, a Steinway sounds completely different to a Yamaha. They both might sound incredible, but they're different. That's that piano's preset. It has one preset. And in fact, that's the case with every single acoustic instrument. My acoustic guitar has one preset. It's the Faith Blood Moon preset. And guess what? It sounds like a Faith Blood Moon because that's exactly what it is. It can't sound like anything else. So why should we be concerned about using a stock preset from a synthesizer? If you're concerned that if you use that synth sound, if you use the swelling JP8 synth sound, let's just get that running in the background because it sounds incredible. Everybody who uses this preset sounds like everybody else who's ever written a piece of music using that sound. What absolute nonsense. As you can hear, it's just a low, beautiful synth tone. Yeah, I just had to overthink what it was doing. It's two notes and it's modulating to the minor sixth, the root minor sixth, root minor sixth. That's all it's doing, is playing a single note and using the weight of the preset to add heft to that sound. The fact is, though, that once we're up and running later in the tune, that synthesizer sound is still there. Granted, the volume's gone down at this point and there are other instruments that are kind of far more in the forefront, but that's a palette of sound that I'm using And it's the creative use of that sound in conjunction with others that help define this thing as a piece of music that I've written. If I just recorded 10 minutes of a single note, then I wouldn't be entitled to call that a tune, and I wouldn't be entitled to claim any ownership of it. There's no intellectual property there. But it's what we do with these tools that matters. A nice analogy that I thought of when I was preparing to make this video was the house brick. Consider the humble house brick. If you imagine a preset to be the house brick, then if you're attempting to suggest that using presets is inappropriate, what you're basically saying is, in order for you to build a house, you first have to make all of the bricks. Now, if I employ a builder to build a house for me, he's going to come along with a load of pallets of bricks. He's not interested in making his own bricks. He's going to use somebody else's creativity. You know, they've designed that brick to be exactly the perfect brick, and he's going to rely on somebody else's expertise to get that right. He's not going to presume that they're all going to fall to pieces when he builds the house. Somebody building a house out of natural stone is going to end up with a completely different house. They're different presets, they're different things that the builder uses to build the house, but he has no interest in the actual construction of them himself. So at this point, I'm going to stop trying to justify the use of stock presets themselves, because I think it's a moot point. It stands completely to reason that these are simply tools, and it's the creative use to which we put them that's the important thing. I want to talk more specifically about how I use presets when I'm writing songs, and we'll use this case here because it's got a nice array of different approaches. Up at the top of the song, where I have these bedrock sounds, the swelling Jupiter and the chill factor, are just stock sounds, and I'm really not changing them at all. But some of the other presets I do edit quite a bit. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have a listen to the running resonance preset, which is a Moog modular. Let's have a quick look at it before we get any further. So here's the Moog modular, beautiful instrument. This is what the instrument sounds like as used in my piece. And if we have a listen to that instrument, the stock preset that it came from, so this is called a running resonance, that's why the track has the name. All of these tracks are named after the preset from which they originated. Here's the original running resonance. Sounds quite starkly different for a couple of reasons. Firstly, this sequence out of the box has no tone. It has a sequence running, but the sequencer is only applying modulation to the filter. It's not actually generating any pitched information. So all of those notes that you're hearing are whatever I press on the keyboard. My sequence, if we go back to that one, however, is tonal. So you can hear the DNA of the sound is still very similar. So I've done two primary things to it. Firstly, I've made it much fatter, much fuller, taken away some of that resonant sound and some of the higher pitch, but I've also introduced a tonal element to it. So let's just compare and contrast those two sounds. I'll run a small section of this tune, and for the first note, the sequence line, you'll hear the sound as it ended up in my tune, and then I'll drag this MIDI part down onto the duplicated version, and you can hear that. So we're listening for the tonal aspect because I've now got this tonal sequence running, but you're also going to start hearing these kind of squelchy resonant pops when I move it down onto the stock sound. Okay, it'll change at bar 41. You can hear that underlying sequence is less interesting now because it doesn't follow the scale of the tune. I also discovered as I was writing this thing and that line was running along in the background that those resonant squelches ended up becoming pretty irritating eventually because they're just too insistent, they're happening too often, which is why I dialed them out. This highlights something that's very important to me personally, although absolutely not essential, and that's to understand the tool that I'm using. When I load up the Moog modular, I understand this thing like the back of my hand. I've done a very long tutorial series on exactly how to use this instrument. I'll put links to all of these synthesizers that I'm talking about, Omnisphere, the Moog. We're going to have a look at the ARP 2600 in a moment. I've made tutorial series for all of those, And I find it really, really useful to understand how this sound is constructed. I probably spend maybe half an hour deconstructing the running resonance preset in order to figure out what all of these cables did and how its sound hung together. I was then able to edit it to my own requirements. I was able to tweak it, and you'll see if you compare those two things together, there are quite a few differences between the two presets. So even though I'm completely happy to use a totally stock preset and have in this tune in multiple situations, I also have the understanding of the presets to be able to edit them when I need, and that's equally important to me. The best example of that in this tune is the final example I want to talk about today, which is this ant farm example at the end. Let's get a loop of this up and running. So here's the ant farm sound. What I'm going to do now is duplicate that track and we'll have a listen to the original preset. So I'll throw all of my changes away, get back to the original sound. Here's what it used to sound like. Very similar. Very similar, but with two significant differences. The first difference is that we have very slightly different sequences. Here's the stock preset. And here's the one as designed by me. Quite subtle but significant. It is a different tune, but more importantly, I'm doing sculpting on the preset itself. Now the ARP 2600 is a monster. This takes some understanding and is one of the more complex synthesizers plugins that I've tackled in my tutorial series. This one really did take some deconstructing, but once you get there, again, you've got that complete power under your hands. If we have a look at the automation on the track, as it appears in this tune, you can see that I'm actually sculpting 4 of the oscillators quite heavily. So these are basically 4 of the sliders in the filter bank. Have a look at the filter bank. So basically, without deconstructing this preset, I don't want to go into too much detail. We've got 3 different oscillators and a noise module, and they're all combining to make that single sound. So this is just a single oscillator on its own. And here's oscillator number 2. And as you can see, they all got different sounds. Let's bring in some noise. And there it is. Absolutely awesome. So what I'm basically doing on this tune is, having figured out how it works, I'm mixing those 4 sounds together dynamically, and it has such an enormous impact on the song. Now, in order to get to that stage, I deconstructed the preset completely. And whilst doing that, I'll make some notes. Here's just an example of some of the notes that I took for this particular preset. So here I've made some notes on the ADSR talking about how the decay time performs different roles in this piece. If I get it running again, pull the ADSR down, and then bring it back in. You can hear those notes getting longer. So by me understanding how this preset is constructed and being able to tweak each of the parameters as required, as I say, in this particular case, I decided I didn't need to mess with the decay because I was quite happy with the core sound, but I did do that mixing process between the different sounds, and that really helped a huge amount. So to continue the example of the house builder from earlier, we started off with this brick, the preset brick. Now I've carved some designs into that brick, I've painted the brick, I've changed the nature of the preset, and so when I come to build the house is going to look different as well. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using the stock brick out of the brickyard. Your house is going to look awesome. But if you understand enough about that thing's construction to be able to alter it, perhaps you can enhance the end product as well. And that's really where presets sit with me. I'm perfectly happy to use stock presets. I love doing it, and I don't feel in any way that I'm kind of cheating when I do, because they are literally just tools. The presets are tools. I use them to write music. But I also enjoy leveraging my understanding of the plugins and the presets that I'm using to be able to tailor them to my own designs. That allows me to add an extra layer of my individuality to the process, because now I'm using a technical skill in addition to a creative one, using those two things in conjunction. And that really, for me, is where the sweet spot lies. Hope you enjoyed this one today. Please hit like if you did. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you again. Thanks very much.